Alright, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to another video here on the channel, and today we're going to be talking about YouTube and why it may be blocked in Russia. Now, as of right now, of me making this video, I want to go ahead and clarify, before we even get any further, that YouTube is not currently banned in Russia. That is not the point that I'm making. I'm basically here to talk about, in this video, about how there's a pretty good chance that YouTube could get blocked in Russia, and if something like this happens, to basically not be surprised. And we're going to be going over a couple of examples of other platforms, Western primarily platforms, that have recently just been banned in Russia, and kind of talk about the situation in general, because there's actually a lot of backstory to why this is possible. There's a pretty long-going now event that's been unfolding that has kind of led to this, and that has been the mass exodus of Western money and corporations and Western support for the country of Russia after they invaded Ukraine. I feel like we already know about that. I don't think I really need to get into the details about the invasion or anything like that. We're kind of just to the point where, like, it's been reported on so much, like, we all already know what's going on. But as that's happened, I think you guys have also heard about, like, the sanctions and stuff that have been levied against Russia's economy, and how the Russian economy has collapsed like 50%, at least like in the first few days that this whole thing was kind of going on, and the US and the EU were all putting their sanctions down on them. Well, that of course also carried over to a lot of private businesses making decisions as well. Now, you probably have seen videos that we've done here on the channel covering about how, like, McDonald's boycotted Russia and whatnot, and how all these other American companies like Starbucks and video game companies and all the pretty much like every business, it seems like, is backing out of Russia right now, not doing business, suspending operations. And the same has kind of taken place on social media, and that's kind of why this whole thing has started in the first place. Now, there have been some moves that have been made by Western social media platforms to join the, I guess, protest against Russia for this entire war breaking out. For instance, Facebook and Instagram, I believe, were able to make a rule where people who called for death and violence against the Russians would not be subject to punishment by their rules and terms of service and stuff like that. Basically, their argument is this is like a very difficult time for people to go through, and they understand people wanting the Russians to be killed. So apparently, if you go on Facebook and whatnot, you wish death to Russian soldiers and whatever, that's not a violation of their policies at this point, right? Well, obviously, Russia did not like the fact that these companies did that, and they basically outright banned their platforms altogether. They've been banned for several days at this point. Both of them are owned by Meta, which is the same company, so it was kind of targeting that specific company, but Google and other companies that run social media platforms may really not be far behind. And the reason that is because they're also joining in against the, I guess, anti-Russian sentiment that's been kind of going around right now. And Google and other companies have decided that they're going to stop letting Russian-backed media sources from efficiently operating on their platforms. So, for example, like what YouTube and Google kind of did, it's really hard to explain in a way that makes it sound like it actually matters almost, but it really does matter. So what they did is they have basically blocked monetization and stuff like that for Russian media outlets and like pro-Russia outlets and stuff like that. They claim that this was done to like fight misinformation about the war and stuff like that, because apparently Russia is very restrictive over their media, right? And they have a pretty wide amount of control over like free speech in their country. So a lot of Russian media outlets basically just puppet the popular government verified opinion kind of thing. And so YouTube and Google are targeting this by basically shutting off ad services to these kinds of accounts. And Russia has made it very clear that companies participating in really any sort of efforts against them like this through social media would have their platforms outright banned. And we've already seen this with YouTube and Instagram and Facebook all now facing, or have actually faced, the repercussions of what's going to happen from the Russians now, right? As we've seen, Facebook and Instagram are basically completely dead in the country. Now, there are ways, I believe, to get around these kinds of bans. Like, I would assume if you're in Russia and you use a VPN, you could probably connect to the Facebook or Instagram services just fine. I'm thinking it's just like Russian IPs and stuff that are banned from the platforms at this point. Maybe it's now illegal to use these services. I don't really know. I can't confirm or deny that, but it is honestly a pretty important important situation because, as you guys can imagine, there are millions of people who use these platforms, and there's actually a couple different problems with that. I really want to talk about why this could be a potential disaster in the making if all of these Western outlets and social medias that people are used to using could potentially be blocked. Well, number one, you know that I would believe the vast majority of people online don't use a VPN, so I would think that the majority of people who could be inflicted against this ban in some way, right, I would think that they, for the most part, don't know that they can access these platforms through like a VPN, or they don't know how to set one up, whatever the case may be, right? But they probably don't have a VPN. I feel like the minority of internet users are the ones, you know, caring about internet safety, using VPNs, doing these types of things, right? So this kind of ban could affect millions of people, but there's also a group of people among that I think could really be hurt by this, and we've already seen examples of it in the, I guess, wake of sanctions and attacks against Russian banks and stuff from Western countries, right? Like a few weeks ago, we covered in a video a Russian YouTuber by the name of NoFuckers who has about 1 million subscribers, and he lives in Russia, and at that point, it was getting to where the sanctions were starting to really get laid down, and he lost the ability to basically make YouTube money off of his channel because, well, the company couldn't transact with his bank. His bank was hit by the sanctions and whatnot directly, so there was no way for YouTube to transfer him any money or anything, and he was going to have to become pretty much reliant on like Bitcoin donations from his audience in order to even have money to really support himself or do anything. And this is a widespread issue going on in Russia right now where these people are, you know, going to ATMs and they can't even take $20 out of the ATM, and there's long lines at grocery stores and pretty much everywhere else because people's cards are declining and they can't use their money. So creators and people who are like influencers and whatnot in Russia, they have no way to make money unless they're taking like crypto donations right now, unless their bank was miraculously not hit by these sanctions. Then there's also a bunch of countries that are banning Russia from SWIFT, or at least talking about doing it, and that just only further complicates the financial situations of most of these people. So there's an honestly very good chance that a lot of creators in Russia are just going to go without paychecks, and as somebody who uses my YouTube paycheck as my main source of income, I really can't imagine how that feels, you know, because you got to think the people in Russia, they didn't support this war for the most part, right? There's tens of thousands of people who've been arrested in major cities for protesting this invasion of Ukraine, and a lot of the creators and whatnot have come out to say that they didn't support any sort of invasion of Ukraine either. But of course, it doesn't matter whether or not you support that, you're in the country, you're going to get hit by those sanctions. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, boo-hoo, the millionaires off of YouTube from Russia and stuff can't make money. Well, you got to think too, there's a lot of artists and video editors and all kinds of different people who are not millionaires whatsoever that also work in Russia, and with a YouTube ban or anything like that could effectively also basically just lose their jobs. I mean, now for me personally, a YouTube ban in Russia isn't going to make or break my channel. I went through and I looked at the analytics just to see like how many of my viewers were Russian, and only about 0.2% of my audience lives in Russia, which even in the last 28 days was still around 22,000 people, which is still a lot of people, you know, that's 22,000 potential subscribers and fans of mine that I might not be able to interact with or get my content out to. And if you're Russian and you're watching this video, my advice to you right now, if you want to circumvent these social media bans and whatnot, I don't know what type of penalty you would potentially be risking by doing so. I don't know if Russia will imprison you for trying to go around these bans or whatnot. I mean, there's a lot of crazy laws that get made up, but if you're interested in getting around bans on Facebook, Instagram, potential ones on like YouTube, Twitter, other companies and whatnot, I really highly recommend that you download a VPN. And I mean, I would say, I guess, that the free VPNs, they could work, they could be great, but honestly, I would really recommend just trying to, if you can, spend some money on that. I know that that's a pretty stupid, I guess, thing to say when your country, you can only take like $20 out of the ATM. But if you can find one that you can afford, or if you aren't affected by those sanctions in any way, or, you know, for some way, shape, or form, you can buy a premium VPN, that might be the better option because I believe that they perform better and I believe that they can connect to more locations around the world. But I mean, you could easily, I think, get by with a free VPN. Rest assured that if you can't spend money right now in Russia on something like that because of the situation, you could probably get away with a free VPN as well. Unfortunately, I don't know the full logistics of it. I mean, I'm not affected by the situation and whatnot, so I don't know how that would affect anyone, but that would be my personal advice, because if, you know, you want to continue to connect to social media and everything, you're going to probably need that. I mean, another big thing though about a potential ban on social media that I think people don't consider is how it can honestly suppress free information being spread. For instance, there's been a lot of people from Russia who have been using social media to speak out against the war effort, and they've been highlighting a lot of very important things, including the fact that a lot of Russians did not support the war, or they're using it to share information about the war from home, you know, from their side of the country, and things that are going on in Russia and whatnot when it pertains to the war. Of course, if even 70% or something of the people doing this were banned from these social media platforms, you can immediately see how that could affect the free flow of information about such a sensitive subject. And these kinds of bans on social media have been used by dictatorships around the world for well over a decade now in order to suppress free information even in times of war. I remember during the Arab Spring when there was protests going on in a bunch of Middle Eastern countries, one of the first things they did was cut access to places like Facebook and Twitter and other major Western social media platforms where people could share information about what was going on the ground in those situations, right? And they were using them to coordinate protests and to coordinate different actions that helped them fight back against the government. And of course, if Russia is banned from Western social media that millions of its people have been used to using, that could severely hamper free speech and free expression and potential protest movements and stuff like that online. So it really could be a lot more larger of a deal, I guess, than a lot of people think. I think this could be something that has very serious implications. I mean, on the surface level, you think, oh, Russia's gonna ban YouTube and other social medias, who cares? But there really is some real world effects to that, right? There definitely is some things to worry about with that I think should be at least brought up and discussed like we did in this manner today. So with all of that being said though, thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're brand new around here on the channel. Follow me over on Twitter and Twitch at @SubToOptimus. Make sure to check out Shop Opti down below. And until my next video, guys, this is Optimus, well, talking about a potential ban on YouTube in Russia, and signing out.